So in this session, we'll discuss how to create an dialog. Okay. So I think in the component you have understood what is the importance of the dialog and why we use the dialog. So before going to the dialog and before discussing about the dialog, so first we'll discuss what does it mean by the content node. Okay. So anyone have an idea about the content node? So in the CRXD, we have a lot of folders, right? So in that lot of folders, we have one thing called as a content folder. Okay. So in that content folder, these are major part which plays a major role in the AEM page loading. Okay. So now this is one EN page. Okay. So in this EN page, suppose from where the content is loading. So here we have a lot of content. I have a header and then I have a footer and then I have a header and search bar and multiple components I have inside this page, right? So from where this content is loading. So who is loading this content? Uh, who is responsible to load this content? Okay. So now how this content is loading? So this content is loading because of this request. Okay. So I have made a request and then this request will be transferred to the server and server will load this particular area. So in the AEM, every request is processed by I have discussed. Every request in AEM is processed by
Right.
Apache Sling. Okay, so Apache Sling is responsible to render this content. So how it is rendering the content? So if you observe the URL closely, so it is rendering the content from the content node. So content, Marvel, US and EN. So this is the page which is actually having the content and Apache Sling is executing this page and this is why I can see the result and I can see the content on the page. Okay, so where this content node would be available? In the JCR. So I can simply go here and then we can have a request. So now it is loading some page. So content, Marvel, US and EN. So inside this EN page, I have a property called JCR content root container. So with the help of this container only, we are adding the components, right? So with the help of the container component only, we are adding the components to the page. So once I have added the content, so these are all the components that are actually which are available on this page. So these components are rendering. Okay, so that's why we can see the content on the page. So if I go for a content node, so if I open any content node here, so teaser is one content node component. Okay, so whenever if I open any component node here, so it has one mandatory property which is Sling resource type property. Okay, so Sling resource type property is one important thing which you have to understand. So what is the use of this Sling resource type properties? So it will forward the request from content node to the component. Okay, so whenever this particular request is going, okay, so Apache Sling is executing this request. So that means which one is executing? So all these nodes will be executed one after other. So while executing these nodes, so here in this content node we'll have the content. Okay, but whatever the thing I have writing inside this one. So suppose if you see here, I have a message, hello world component, and inside that model message I'm having. So a lot of message I'm having here. Okay. So how this content is loading? So this content is loading. Why? Because we have written inside the .html file of that component. So hello world.html file. So how the hello world.html file will be executed when it is making the request from the content node, right? So because our hello world.html file is inside the apps folder. Okay, but it is making a request to the content node, which is content folder. It is making a request. Okay, where the component does not exist, but still the component is being executed and we are able to render the content because whenever I add any component inside the page, so automatically a node would be generated by the Apache Sling inside the JCR. So right now, if I go there, so here the last one is article details. Okay, so article details is one component. So now if I go there and if I try to add an accordion, okay, so right now it has added one component, accordion component has been added. So now if I go to this content node, And if I refresh this container, okay, so open the container. So now accordion component has been added here. Okay, so every time when we drag and drop a component on a page, so automatically a node would be generated inside the content folder. And then inside, whenever a node is generated, so every content node will have one mandatory property, which is sling colon resource type property. So this sling colon resource type property now will forward the request from content node to the component. Okay, so now this is the property. So Marvel, components and accordion. So this is the path we are having. So if I select this path, which is an relative path. Okay, so now in order to search here, we have to make that inside absolute path. Okay, so just search for apps, apps, and then paste your path. So apps, Marvel, component, and accordion. So now if I hit this request, so it is going towards the accordion component, and then this accordion component is executing. Okay, so now I am here. I cannot find any .html file as well. Okay, so inside this accordion file is one node, so which is a component. If I check this one, so if you observe the JCR primary type, it is a CQ colon component. Okay, so as I said, a .html file is executing, so that's why the content is loading here, right? But here I can't find any .html file. But how it is loading the content? So now from here we also have one more property. If you observe closely, so here we have one more property, which is sling colon resource super type property. Okay, so whenever this component is executing, so this component is getting the properties from an super component. Okay, so already existing component it can be, or a parent component as well we can call. So inside that parent component we have the .html file, and that .html file is being executed, and that is the content we can see here. Okay, so now that's good. So now you understand what is the difference between sling resource type and sling resource super type. Okay. So sling resource super type helps us and gives us an ability to use the properties of a parent component. Whereas sling resource type property will forward the request to the other nodes, which are whatever the thing we are specifying, it will forward the request. Okay. So now in this case, now, whatever the content you see here, I have a lot of properties. Okay, so inside accordion or inside Marvel edges stuff, so I can write the .html file, and then with the help of the dialog, we can add the content inside, right? So now, with in order to fill the content inside the content node, we need to have something. Okay. So now, how can I access this one? So it is on the page. I can access this component. So when I access this component, if I want to fill the content inside this component, so then dialog gives us the option to fill the content inside the component. And those components we are reading inside the .html. Those content we are reading inside the .html file, and that content is displaying on the page. Okay, so now in this session, we'll discuss how to create an CQ dialog. Okay, so with the help of the CQ dialog, what we can do, we can add the content inside the content node. Okay, so how to create a CQ dialog? Uh, so first we'll create a component, and then with the help of that component, we'll create the dialog. So how to create a component? So go to your project folder in the apps, and then inside the components, we can have a permission to create a component. Okay. So how to create it? Right click on it and create a component. I can also create a node, but here we can fill multiple options at the same time. So I don't want to get any thing from the super component. So that's why I'll not use the super type option, and then click on next and then OK. Okay. So now I have created a component, and then and file has been generated. Okay. So now here you have to change the extension from .jsp to .html. If you have the knowledge, you can directly write the JSP as well. Okay, so JSP will also execute. So now I have created the component. Okay, so now can I add this component to the page, or else I am missing some properties? Hmm?
CQ dialog.
CQ? CQ dialog. Okay, so we have to create an CQ dialog. So right click on it, create, create a node. Okay. So here before AEM 6.2 version or AEM 6.0 version, the node of the CQ dialog name can be anything. Okay. So node name can be anything, but the type should be CQ colon dialog only. Okay. But after 6.0 version of AEM, so they have become mandatory that always the name of the node should be CQ colon dialog. Okay, always the node should be CQ colon dialog and then type should be empty unstructured. Okay, and just click on OK and then save the changes. Okay, so now we have created a node CQ dialog. So that means if I go to the AEM and then if I go to the EN page, I need to add the component and check whether the dialog has been added or not. So how can I add the component? So I can go to drag and drop option. So with the help of container component, I can insert that one. Okay. So when I search for the component Marvel form, so it is not available. Why it is not available? Am I missing some properties?
Component group.
Component group.
Group.
Okay, so we have to add one more property called as a component group. Okay, so just go to Marvel, any other component, we can just copy them and then forms in the place. Okay, so if you want to type as well, you can type. So I have added the component group as well. So once you have added the component group, JCR title is there, .html file is there, CQ dialog is there, everything is there. So now I can go to the EN page and then I can add the, I can drag and drop the component on the page. So now go to the drag and drop option and then search for your component. So our component is available. So Marvel forms. So from where this content is loading, it is from the .html file. So if I try to order, it is not opening the dialog. Okay, so that means still we have to create some more configurations inside the dialog. Okay, so this dialog has been already created. Okay, so there is no need to create from the scratch. So it has been already created. So we can just get this dialog and then we can use them to this particular node. Okay, so now whenever I open this dialog, I want to execute that node. Okay, I want to execute the other node. So how to execute that one? With the help of sling resource type property. So sling colon resource type. So now whenever we are having, so the request will be forwarded to the path which we specify here. Okay. So now go to there. So where the dialog is created, so the dialog has been as a part of the foundation components. Okay. So in AEM, we have two types of components. One is core components and second one is foundation components. So core components would be available under apps, core, WSM and foundation components are available in the lips folder. Okay, so go to lips and then inside the lips we have an option of CQ. Okay, so lips CQ and then GUI components and then ordering and then we'll have an option of dialog. Okay, so this is a dialog which is already configured inside AEM. So a lot of content is there inside this one. So instead of creating everything from scratch, I want to use the existing existing functionality of the dialog. So simply copy this path and go to your component. Okay, so go to your CQ dialog node and in the help of the sling colon resource type property, add this path. Okay, so remember one point, every time whenever we are giving a path inside AEM, we have to give the relative path, not the absolute path. Okay, right now right now we are giving the absolute path. Okay, so change it to the relative. So just remove lips from the stuff. Okay, and then add, save the changes. Okay, so now I have created the dialog as well. So and then whenever I open the dialog, it gives us some structure. Okay, so go to the EN page and try to open the dialog again. Try to refresh and check. Okay, so right now I am getting some structure. Okay, so this is a dialog that is opening. Okay, so how this dialog is opening? So in the AEM, this dialog has been built based upon two technologies. Okay, So one is Granite UI and second one is Coral UI. Okay. So Coral UI is nothing but it is a part of CSS and JS framework. Okay. So simply we can say that it is like an bootstrap framework. So this Coral UI is implementing the AEM. Suppose any console in AEM has been implemented with the help of the Coral UI only. So if I go for Sites console, so Sites console is also Coral UI. Our dialog is also Coral UI. So everything is been with the Coral UI, and whatever the data that I can add inside this dialog. So with the help of the Granite UI components, we can add that we can add those properties with the help of Granite UI components. Okay. So with the help of these two texts, the dialog has been implemented inside AEM. So every console in AEM is implemented with the help of Coral.js. Okay. So now it is opening the dialog, and then here we have a lot of options. Help option is there, and then full screen, close, and then okay, so multiple options are coming. So from where these multiple options are coming, so these options are coming from the Sling resource type property. Okay, that means this from this particular node we are getting those options. But if I open the dialog in full screen, so it is getting a full screen dialog. Okay, but when I want to use in a minimized version, it is not having an exact shape and size, right? So it is not having some correct shape and size. So in order to specify the second thing, here we have, in order to get a well-defined structure to the dialog, so here we can create one more mandatory node, so which is content node. So content. Okay. So always the node name should be content only. The first node name should be CQ colon dialog, and second node name should be content node. Okay. So just click on OK and then save the changes. So inside this as well, so I don't want to create from scratch. So simply I want to use the existing one. So every time it would be difficult, right? So going there and searching inside the huge library where the components are available. So in order to break those things. So AEM has provided one documentation, so we can open those documentation. So Adobe, okay. So Adobe has provided the Granite UI documentation. So where it has a lot of paths in lot of component paths, I can just get them. So right now, in order to get a fixed length and fixed size of the dialog, so they have created one node called as an fixed columns. Okay. So go to this fixed columns, and then here you will have the path where the fixed columns is there. Okay. So we have to specify the path only, right? So you can just copy this path, and then inside the Sling resource with the help of Sling resource type property, add to the content node and then save the changes. So for the dialog, in some cases, there is no need to refresh the page. Okay. So if you observe here, so there is no need to refresh the page, but if something is not loading, so then try to refresh the page and check. So now, right now, my dialog has some well-defined structure and the shape. Okay. So right, when you have inside AEM, so we have some components called as an container components. Okay. So they act like a container, like a box. Okay. So whenever you are having these container components, so every container component we need to add one mandatory property which is called as an items. Okay. So right now fixed columns is a container component. So that means I have to add one more attribute, one more mandatory child node which is items. So right click on it and then create a node called as an items and then save. Okay. So with the help of these items, inside those items, I can add multiple items. Okay. So every time when you are going for a container component, so mandatory child node, we have to add as an item. So we have a lot of container components. Okay. So fixed columns is one container component. Container is one container component. Well is one container component. Select is one container component. Tab is one container component. So we have different types of container components. Every time when we have to add this mandatory child node that is items. So whenever you are creating a dialog, so every time, so these three nodes should be the same with the same names as well. Okay. So first node should be CQ colon dialog, and then resource string colon resource type should be pointing towards this path only, which is this CQ components ordering dialog. Okay. And then content node as well. So always the three node names should be same. So from the fourth node name, so we can give any name. So there is no mandatory name, but until here, so the node names are mandatory, and then Sling resource type properties are also mandatory. So right now, if I open the dialog, so dialog looks empty. Okay, it does not have any name or anything. Okay, so if content author is opening the dialog, he need to understand what is this dialog for. Okay, so in order to add those things, so here we can for the readability purpose, so here we can add one more property inside the dialog node, which is jcr colon title. So with the help of the jcr colon title property, we can get the name for the dialog. Okay, so jcr colon title and then any name, and then click on add, save the changes, and then try to open the dialog again. Okay, refresh it once. So there is a mistake in the spelling, so that's why it is not shown. So always the properties should be same. So properties are specific, these are predefined words. You have to add the same properties. So delete that one and then add the title. Okay, so now it is getting a title for the dialog. So in order to add the components inside this dialog, we can add directly. So if I want to add any, if I want to get a text field, okay. So in order to enter some text, I can get a text field and then I can directly add inside this one. So, but I'll take a container and then inside that container, I'll add the components. Okay. So items and then click on create a node. So node name can be anything. So I'll just give as column. So column and then in the sling colon add one property which is sling colon resource type, and then what I want a container to hold all my elements. Okay, so just go there and then search for container. Okay, so this is the container we need to add, and then go inside and then copy the path and then add the path, save the changes. Okay, so if I open the dialog again, so I can see nothing because it is a container which is an empty space. So as I have added a container component, what I need to create? Items I have to create. So create a node, items node I can create. So items, if I, so inside these items, I can add multiple items. So whatever the type of fields I am required with, so those all fields I can add inside these items. So right now I want to add an text. Okay. So I want to add a text field or we can name it as an heading. Okay. So I want to add a heading to the component. So at the time, right click on it, create a node, and then I'm leaving as heading. Okay, so sling colon resource type. So heading is a text, right? So I need to add an text. So in order to add a text here, so just go to the documentation and search for a text field. So text. So text field is a which is a predefined component. So it is a text field component. So inside this text field component, I can directly copy this value and then in the sling colon resource type, add this value. So if I open the dialog again, so now I can see an text field. So if you observe here, I can see a text field and then I can enter the data as well. So, but after entering the data, so we have to specify user, right? So what is this field for? Okay. So for the readability purpose, content author is not a developer. Okay. So he'll have the Figma. According to the Figma, he has to make the content. Okay. So now I need to specify to the content author that why I have created this field. Okay. So in order to specify to the content author that here we can add one more property which is called as an field label. Okay. So field label gives us a name to the field. Okay. So field label and then uh, we can give as title and then click on add. Save the changes and then try to open the dialog again or else refresh and check. Okay. So no field label means yeah. So the spelling is wrong. Okay, so now I'm getting a table, I'm getting a title to this field. So with the help of the field label property, we can give a name to the particular field. So now we'll add some content. Okay, so heading or I'm adding some content. And if I close this dialog, so right now, and if I try to open the dialog again, okay, so it is not storing the data. If it is storing the data, so then I can see that the data would be available here. But whenever I submitted this particular form or whenever I submitted the dialog, I can't see the data is storing. Okay, so in order to check where the data will store inside the content node, right? So we can just go to the content node and inside the content node as well, we can check whether the data whatever we have entered is storing or not. So Marvel and then en, so go inside en. So we have added a component, right? So just try to refresh this container. Okay, so Marvel form is the component, and inside this Marvel form component, so if you observe closely, whatever the title I have entered, okay, so whatever the title I have entered here, so this title is not storing inside the content node. Okay, so in order to store the data inside the content node, so how it is storing the data? It is storing the inside this particular content node. It is storing any kind of content node. It is storing the data in the form of key value pairs. Okay, so name and then value. So name is nothing but a key and then value pair. Okay, so now in order to create a in order to create a key, so how can I create a key? So key is used to store the data. Okay, so simply like a variable in Java. So if I want to store the data, how I can store the data in Java? With the help of a variable. So now whatever the data that is entering inside this text field, I want to store the data, so that I'll go for a name. Okay, so name is one property which creates a variable to store the data, and then you have to follow some syntax. So every time when you are adding one property, you have to use dot and slash. So dot slash title. Okay, and then click on add, save the changes, and open the dialog again. So if I go in now, if I try to add any value and then click on OK, so I can check. So I can immediately check here whether it is storing or not by opening the dialog again. So now if you observe, the data has been stored. So if I go to this content node and if I try to refresh again, so right now it is storing the title. So how it is storing the title? With the help of the variable we have created. So this is title is the key, and then value is the one which we have entered with the help of the dialog. Okay, so that is how we can create a text field. Okay, so right now if I want to, so with the help of a text field, what can I create? I'm just writing a single line text. Okay, so single line text only I can configure. So if I want to create multi-line text, so how we can do that? So it has provided one more component with the help of the text description or text area. Okay. Text area is one component which gives us a ability to add the multiple lines of text. Okay, so just copy this one and then crxd, create a node which is description and then name. So every time when we are creating, so we have to follow the same rules. So name would be description, and then what we can add for the readability purpose, I can add a field label. So field label description, and then in order to store the data, name. Okay, so in order to, so name I have already added. Okay, so in order to make, in order to get the text area, so we have to forward the request, right? So that is sling colon resource type is the property, and then inside the sling colon resource type property, add the value and save the changes. So now if I open the dialog again, so now I can see an text area. Okay, so description. So it is not there means, so there is something issue. So sling colon resource type. So try to refresh and check. Where I have created.
It's inside heading, not in items.
Okay, okay, sorry, sorry. Yes, inside the items you have to create. So now I can see an description. So whatever the data I can enter here, so that data will store inside the content node. So text area also I can create. So suppose if I want to create an image, or if I want to add any images or links, or any forward request will write, right? Suppose if I click on a button, so it is going towards a different page. So which we can configure with the help of the links. Okay. So in order to get an image as well, so we can configure those images with the help of the paths. So in order to write those things, so with the help of a path field, we can do that. So with the help of the path field, we can create an images, and then we can give the paths with the help of the path field. So this field, a field that allows the user to enter a path. Okay, you can just select this path field, and then go to items, create a node, and then I'll name it as an image. Okay, I want to render an image, so I'll name it as an image. Okay, so sling column resource type would be pointing towards the path field. And then in order to specify that I need to add an image, so what can I do? So field label, and then we can give, in order to store the data, we have to give the name variable. So dot slash image. So right now it is giving us a ability to over to check inside the root path. So now I'm having a repository access. So this repository access, have you seen somewhere? Apps, bin, conf, content, etc. So where you have seen, this is nothing but the JCR, CRXT. Okay. So where the images will store? Images will store inside content, and then your project assets, and then whatever the project you are using. So inside that project, images would store. Okay, so Marvel is the project, and then this is the image. So simply you can select this image, and then you can observe here. So if you observe this component as well, so now when I want to select this path, so it is giving the repository structure, right? Entire repository structure it is giving. So from the root node, I'm able to see the repository structure, but content author does not have an idea of this repository structure. Okay, so for that, we'll specify to the content author that, so I need to give the access to the content author only to select the paths from this particular folder. Okay, so then I'll have the images directly. So then he can select the images directly. So in order to add this property, so here we can so here we have one more property which is called as an root path. Okay, so with the help of the root path property, we can specify the root path. Okay, so we are adding a limitation to the content author that he can only select the path for under these values. Okay, so right now content daemon Marvel, and if I click on add and then save the changes, if I try to open the dialog again, right now we'll have an option to select only from the Marvel folder. So but he's getting all the one root path. So root path is the variable name, and then open the dialog again. Okay, so right now he's directly inside the Marvel folder. Okay, so inside the Marvel folder, we have only two images, so that's why you can select. Okay, so that is how we can create an path field. So with the help of the path field, it gives a content author an ability to enter the paths. Okay, so we can also create more fields here. So we have created an text, and then we have created an description, and then we have created an path field. Okay, suppose if I want to create a checkbox. Okay, so how can I create a checkbox? So checkbox is already a field available. So just search for checkbox. Create a node, and then any node. So subscribe is one thing I'm giving. Okay, and then save the changes. So he'll not have a root path. Okay, so in order to forward the request, sling colon resource type, and then add the value. Okay, So and then so whenever we are going for a checkbox, so for the checkbox field label will not work. Okay, for the checkbox field label will not work. So in order to specify the field here, so here we have to add one more property which is text. So with the help of the text, we can give the name to the checkbox. Okay, so add a text and then so subscribe is the value I'm giving as a text and then add. So if I want to give one more property, so in order to store the data, we have to give the name, right? I'm giving the name as well as subscribe and then open the dialog. Okay, so I'm getting an checkbox. So once I'm selecting the value inside the checkbox, and then if I click on OK, okay, so I have saved the dialog, and once I've saved the dialog, okay, so if I go for the Marvel form, and then if I load it, so it is storing the data. Okay, so subscribe, it is storing the data. So how to store a checkbox? So as it is a Boolean field, we have to store the value as either true or false. So when I click on OK, so it should be true. So when it is unchecked, the value should be false. But if you observe here, it is storing as on and off. It will store. So if you want your checkbox to store the value as true or false, so for this checkbox, we can add one more property which is value. Okay, so value and then here we have an option of type. So type should be boolean. Okay, so value boolean true is the property we have to add. So when you specify value boolean true, so at that time it will automatically so whenever I select or unselect the checkbox, so at that time it will store the data as true or false. So now if I go for form, so and then refresh. So right now this subscribe is storing the data as a true. Okay, so if you want to store the value as true or false, so for the checkbox we have to add one property which is value boolean true. Okay, so we have added right now we have added four fields, right? So what fields? Single line text, multi-line text, and then we have added a path field, and then we have added a checkbox. Suppose if I want to create an a drop down. Okay, so for the countries options we'll have a drop down, right? So India, US, Australia, German, so we'll have a drop down for the options. Okay, so for the drop down, in order to create a drop down inside the dialog, so it is a predefined field, so where I can just check as a select. Okay, so select is one field where I can create a drop down. So select creates a drop down component. Okay, so select is a component to represent a concept of selection of some options. So for multiple options will be there. So from those multiple options, if you want to select, so then with the help of the select component, we can do that. So go to items and then create a node and then name it as country. So you can name it as anything. I'm just giving the random values. Okay. String colon, resource type, and the value should be a string value. Okay. So string and then select, save the changes. So for the readability purpose, we have to create an field label, and to store the data of this field name. Name is the property we have to add. So if I open the dialog again, so right now I can see an drop down. Okay. But if you observe the drop down here, I don't have any options. Okay. So in order to add the in order to add the options inside this drop down, so how can I add? So this selector. Okay. So which Granite UI component I'm using? Select is a Granite UI component. So this select component is a container. Okay. So select is also one container component. So in order to, for as it is a container component, what I have to add one child node. Items is the child node I have to add. So right click on it and then uh, right click on it and then create a node and then name it as items. So items node will not have any sling colon resource type property. Okay. So items is an empty node to hold the multiple items. So inside these items, as why I have taken as items, because I don't have only one option, right? So we have multiple options. Okay. So in order to configure those multiple options inside these items, I can write the multiple options. So inside this, create one more node and name it as option one. You can name it as anything. So I'm naming it as option one. And then here we can add two properties to the options. So one is text is one property. Okay. So text is the display text. So inside this drop down, so for the display text purpose, we'll add the text property. Okay. So text will be India. And then when I click on add, so the display text will be India. So inside this drop down, the display text will be India. Okay. So whenever the user selects this particular text, internally you want to select a value. Okay. So when the user selects India, so it should store the value as India. Okay. So at that time we can give one more property which is value. Okay. When the user selects this text, then underlying value will be selected internally. Okay. So value will also be India. And then click on add. So if I go there and refresh the page, open the dialog, and then here I'm having an option of India. Okay, but once I select this option as India, and then if I go for the content node and see what data it is storing, so it will store the value. Okay, so what is the value we have given? So country, it is storing short I. Okay, so smaller case I it is storing. Okay, so text is for the display option purpose, and then whenever the user select that particular option, internally it will store the value. Suppose if I want to create one more value, one more option I want to create, so just simply copy paste this node. You can create from scratch also, or else you can copy paste the node. So instead of copy of option one, rename it from option one to option two. Okay, so text will be whatever the text you specify, so that will be the display purpose. Okay, and then save the changes. So right now how many options I'll have two options, India and UAE. Okay, so that is how we can create an select component. Okay, so we have created a text, and then a title description we have created, and then a subscribe, and then we have created a drop down. Okay, suppose whenever you observe here, uh, what else we can create. So right now, once I have added a title, okay, I'm having an option only to add the title once. Okay. And then I have an image component. So for the image as well, I have an option only to enter once. Okay. But consider if I'm having some carousel. Okay. So inside carousel, so what we'll have, carousel is something which slides the images. Okay. So if I open any page, so then you first you'll see one inside the hero component, you'll see a carousel, right? So images would be scrolling. Okay. So inside that, that means they are configuring multiple images, not only single image, they are configuring multiple images. So right now, if I want to add five images, so how can I add the five images? I have to create the five image components, five image fields I have to create, right? So instead of creating five image fields manually, suppose, so if I create five image fields manually as well, so we'll have the ability to add the five. So if I want four, I can add four. Okay. But every time, suppose if I want to add 10 fields, okay, if I want to add 10 images, at that time, what happens? So again, developer should come, and then developer needs to add one more path field. Okay. So right now I have configured one. So that means content author can author only one image. Okay. So right now, suddenly content author wants to author two images. Okay. So in order to author two images, so here we don't have any field to author two images, right? So I have to create one more field. So then he will be contacting to the developer that add one more path field. Okay. But in some cases, if you don't know how many images we want to add inside that particular component, so at that case, we can create them as a multi-field. So what does it mean by the multi-field? So multi-field gives us the permission to add. Okay, so one time if you add, so here we'll have an add option. So how many fields I want, I can simply add them inside the dialog only. Okay, so I'll show you how to create an multi-field. So go to items, and inside these items, right click on it, create a node, and name it as, you can name it as anything. So I'll just select as multi. Okay, So inside this multi-field, so every time, so in order to multi-field, so we can, in order to store the data, we can give one property which is name. Okay, so we'll not give the name property to the multi-field. So we'll just give the sling colon resource type, and then go to the documentation, search for multi-field. So select this multi-field and then give it a add. So in order for the readability purpose, create an field label. Okay, field label is multi-field. So remember one point, every time when you are creating a multi-field, so we have to create one mandatory child node which is called as an field. Okay, so mandatory child node we have to create which is field. Okay, because I'll show you why we have to create the field. Okay, so go inside this field and then add a property here. So right now I want to store the data. So whatever the field that is there inside this field, I want to store the data. So I'm giving the name as dot slash multi-field. So inside the dot slash multi-field, it will store the data. And then in order, if I want a path field, so here with the help of sling colon resource type property, I can add an path field. So the syntax should be same. So sling colon resource type. So I want a path field. So simply I can go for the image and then I can just copy this one, and inside the field, I can give the path field. Okay. So for the path field, so if I want to give an image, I can give the field label. So field label. Now I'll give image only. Okay, so field label is image. So why we have to give the field label? Okay, so right now I have an option. Okay, so I can't find the field, but I have an option. So once if I click on add button, so I'm getting an option to enter the path. Okay, so this is a path field. Okay, I'm getting an option to enter the path. So I can add one image. Suppose if I want to have two images, I can simply click on two. So every time when I click on add, multi-field gives us the ability to add how many number of items I want to have. I can add the items. So if you observe closely, so how many items I have added? So four or five items I have added. Okay. But I am adding only a single field. Okay. Which is a path field. I'm only having a path field. So whenever I click on add, I'm getting a path field. Okay. So if you go for an image tag in the HTML. Okay. So if I go for image tag in the HTML, so what you'll have inside an image tag in order to render an image. So how can I start that?
Source.
So source attribute you'll be specifying, and then alternate text also you'll be specifying for an image tag. So if you observe here, so right now we have an ability to add the source. Okay, we have an option to add the source. So with the help of the path field, I can add an source. But in order to add an alternate text as well, it is one mandatory property in form of development. Okay, so alternate whenever the image is not loading, at that time it will load the alternate text. Okay, so in order to load the alternate text, okay, so in order to write the alternate text, we'll be configuring the alternate text as well dynamically. Suppose if I make the alternate text static, what happens? Suppose I'll give an reference of a car image, but I'll specify bike image. So then if whenever the for a particular user, if the image is not loading, so then instead of image, it will load the alternate text, right? So at that case, it would be an problem. So we'll also configure the alternate text as well with the help of the uh, dialog only. Okay. So now in order to configure the alternate text with the help of dialog, so at that time what I need to have here, so I need to add one more field, right? Text field I need to add. So in order to add an text field, so basically we can create two types of multi fields. Okay. So one type of multi field is normal multi field. So where I can add only a single field inside this one. Okay. So I can add only a single field. Suppose inside this multi field, if I want to add more than one field, it is not possible. It is not possible. Okay, because it is a normal multi field. So in order to create a multi field with multiple number of items, not only single item, If you want to create with multiple number of items, so then we have to create one more field which is called as a composite multi-field. So with the help of the composite multi-field, we can add multiple items inside an multi-field. So this is a normal multi-field. So now we have to create an composite multi-field. So click on create an node and name it as composite. You can name it as anything. Composite multi. Okay, so composite multi, I'm naming it. Okay, so as it is a multi-field, we will have the same string colon resource type property. So copy it and then composite multi-field have the same string colon resource type, and then field label is also, you can just specify any field label. So I'm copying from the previous multi-field which I have created. So here you can mention composite multi-field. Okay. So now in order to add, so whenever I create a multi-field, so what I need to create the child node, field is the child node. So create a node and name it as field. Okay. So right now field is also one child node we are having. Okay. So inside this field, if I want to, so I have created a multi-field. So inside the multi-field, if I want to have only one option, okay. So which is a path field or a text field or only a path field, only a text field or only a text description or only one fields if you want to add. So those fields I can directly add inside this field. So which we have done before. So inside the field only, I have added the path field. But right now, I have created a composite multi-field in order to hold multiple elements. Okay. So in order to hold multiple elements, we, how can I hold? Okay. So if it is a single item, I can hold in my hand. Multiple items, I have to go for a container, right? So we have to go for a container. So container gives us the ability to hold multiple items. So we have seen the container, right? So as long as a container as well, we also have one more container component which is well. So well or container both are same, so which gives well is also same thing, right? Which will hold the water. Okay. So so samely the well we can represent, so well is similar to a container. So it is a container to render each item as a column. Okay, so simply you can select an well. So well is also an existing container component. Okay, and then in order to store the data, so we have to give the name. Oh, okay. And then here, every time when you are going for a composite multi-field, in the main multi-field node, we have to add one property, which is composite is one property. Okay. So every time in the composite multi-field, so here we have to add one property, which is composite Boolean true. Composite and then name it as Boolean true. Okay, so it is a Boolean value. So why I'm giving as composite Boolean true is, so when you go for a multi-field, whenever we are storing the data, internally in the content node, it will create a child node. Okay, suppose if I click on add here, so now if I click on add, okay, so I'm not getting any field because we haven't added any items inside this one. So for every add button, it will create a child node, and inside the child node it will store the items. Okay, so in order to get like that, so as if well is a container component, so well is a container, right? So that means I have to create an items. So create a node items, and then inside the items I can add multiple items. So I'll just copy these items. So I want an text and description, two fields I want to have. So text I've got, and then you can got, so text and image I want. So I'll go for an image, copy and then paste. So we are having and heading and then image. So we'll change the names in order to avoid the confusion. So instead of heading, I'll specify alt. Okay, so alternate text and then image. In order to store the data, I'll specify multi image. Okay, so title, it will, instead of title, it will store with the help of alternate text. So alt is one attribute. Okay, so now I have created an composite multi-field. Okay, so if I try to open the dialog again, so at that time I can create, I can, whenever I click on add button, so it is loading the dialog with two fields. One is title and then second one is image. Okay, and then if I have, so I'm having a single field here. So in the single field, I'm not getting the field label. So just go there and check whether the property is correct or not. So label is correct only. I think maybe different property we have to add. So I'll check it and I'll update. Okay. So right now we have an alternate field and then we are having an images. Okay. So now if I try to add any text here, so in order to directly take you to the folder, what property we need to add? Root, root path. Okay. So root path is the property we can add. So I can have an image. So if I want to add one more image, so simply I can go there and then I can add one more image. So if I want to configure a title here, so I can configure a title and then we can configure an image as well. So it is not title, right? It's alternate text. Alt I am specifying. So just remember it as alt. So if I want to add one more element, so we can add one more element as well. Search and then want to add one more, can add a lot of elements. So whenever I'm selecting these elements and if I click on close, so where the content will store inside the uh, where the content will store
And
inside the content node. So as we are giving a multi-field, so if you observe for the multi-field, it is storing a child element. Okay. So when it comes to multi-field, it should not store the data inside the direct properties because we have more than one. Okay. So it should be created as a child element. So how it is creating as a child element? So we have given one property inside the composite multi-field, right? Which property? Composite boolean true. So when you are specifying composite boolean true, so at the time it will create the child node, and for every item we will add, so those item nodes will be created. Item 0, item 1 and item 2. So if I go there and if I try to add one more item, item 4 will be created. Okay. So that is how we can add multiple fields inside an so that is how we can add multiple fields inside an multi-field. Okay, so right now everything is good. So we have added the content, we are storing the content, and then but we are not displaying. So why we want to create the content to display the content, right? But we are not displaying the content. Okay, so how can I display the content? So with the help of HTML, we can display the content. So go inside this one and then Marvel form.html, and inside this HTML, I can display the content. Okay, so H1 uh, component, and then H1 is a closing tag, right? You have to specify the closing tag. So if I refresh now, what it will get? Marvel form component. So if I add this component again as well, so what I'll get? The data as Marvel form only. But I don't want to get the data like this. Okay. So whatever the data, so even for the title or H1, anything. So I want to get this title. Okay. So whatever the user enters the title here, so that title I want to get. So content author, whatever the content author that enters the title, so that title I need to get. So you can say that before I have ordered the ordered the content, but that content is not available now. Right? It is a different component. I have added it one more time. Okay, so for the previous one, we have added a different content, and for this one, I haven't added inserted any content. So every time when you are adding, so you can have a doubt, right? So as I added the component again, so there may be a conflict of content because if I enter here, so that content also can be read because both of them are the same components. But if you observe the content node, so a unique ID will be generated. Uh, so if I refresh again, so as we are adding the component there, so that component would be available on the content node, right? So it means the component is available here. But if you observe here, it is adding an unique ID at the end. Okay, so who is adding this one? Apache Flink is adding a unique ID. So if it is finding a duplicate, so at that time it will add an unique ID. So it will have a different content. Okay, so contents will be stored. So the content of the second component will be stored inside this unique array, and then content of the first component will be storing inside the first one which we have added. So now whatever the content I want to read, so whatever the data that is there inside this particular, I'll delete the other one. So whatever the data that is there inside the uh, this dialog, so which we will be storing inside the content node. So in order to read this data and then in order to display them on the page, so how we can do that? Okay, so no need to create custom things, no need to write a lot of code here. So here Adobe has provided one predefined API, which is called as an value map. Okay, so for that value map, whenever it is executing, so it will create one object called as an properties. Okay, so if you want to read the data from these nodes, so then with the help of properties keyword, we can directly read the data from the properties which are available here. Okay, so here HTL. So this is something called as an HTML. HTML templating language. So with the help of the HTML templating language only, we can read the data from the content node. So it is an expression language. So with the help of this expression language only, we can read the content. So that expression language, we can specify that inside the dollar curly braces. So inside this dollar curly braces, properties is a predefined object which is Apache Sling is creating. So with the help of the properties object, I can read all the data which is storing here. Okay. So properties dot and then title. So I want to get the title. So simply you can select the title. If it is hard from here, you can go to the heading and then I can copy from here. Okay. So always copy paste instead of typing. So if you have any naming conventions error, it will not inject the data. Okay. So I recommend to just select the value and then change the value. Okay. So for the dialog, you can there is no need to refresh the page. But if you are changing the .html file, then you have to refresh the page. So right now, what I have added a title. Suppose if I want to read the description, how can I read the description? So paragraph and then description I'll use as inside the name variable, right? It is storing the data. So just copy this name and then dollar curly braces properties dot description and then at the end backslash p. So right now there is no description, right? So try to add the description. So where I have to add the content in the en page. So now it is rendering the description. So same like if I want to render an image, how to render an image type. So image src equals to will be specifying the path. So where I'll get the path from? From the content node. Okay. So in order to read the path here, dollar curly braces properties dot image. So that will read the image. So here we can also pass one more attribute which is alternate text. Okay, so alternate text I'll display the title only. Okay, when the image is not loading, it will load the alternate text. Save the changes and then try to refresh the EN page. So right now it is not loading the image, so that's why it is retrieving the alternate text. Content and Marvel Iron Man. We have the image. Okay. So same like how to read the other data as well. So same with the help of properties objects, we can read the other data as well. Okay. So the same thing, try to implement it. So any questions?